What's up, gang? Welcome back for another quick tip, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm going to do a quick tip that might kind of trigger some people, maybe. Every time I do a topic like this, I just want to say, look, you have your way, I have my way, right? In my opinion, there is no right or wrong way. There are many ways to do a lot of this hobby, so I'm going to go into kind of my quick tip for wet palette management. I personally don't feel that wet palettes are designed for us miniature painters to be using paint for days on end, but that's neither here nor there. I'm going to show you a technique that I found works really well if you have paint on your wet palette. I do like to keep a very hydrated wet palette. So that being said, the osmosis transfer of moisture between the permeable membrane that is palette paper, I get a lot more moisture transfer up into my paint when the lid's closed. Since this video was recorded, the exemplar wet palette has come out from Game Envy. I'll have a link down below. You can get yourself one using my discount. But it's a completely different wet palette system than when I made this video a year and a half ago. So a lot has changed as far as like moisture mitigation. I think the exemplar wet palette kind of changed the game for miniature painters as far as wet palettes go. It's very affordable. This isn't a commercial on that. I did a product review video on this channel. If I'm savvy enough, I'll put a little box up here you can click on to take a look. But the point is, I'm going to show you kind of my little trick for still being able to use paint that has sucked up too much water or moisture from your wet palette. So check out the video here. If you enjoy what you see here, then do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. And if you're not aware, I also stream 3 nights a week over on Twitch. And of course, I have a Patreon where all these quick tips live for about a year and a half before I start to release them out to the public. And I have an archive of now almost 80 tutorials over there. So I'll have all the links down below. You can check them out as you see fit. Appreciate you watching. Take care of yourselves. What's up, gang? For today's little quick tip, I just want to talk about wet palettes and a lot of people's misunderstandings of wet palettes as far as us and miniature painters. Frankly, this is strictly opinion, but through my experience over the years of painting with acrylics on wet palettes, I've learned that obviously a lot of people have different opinions as far as how you should moisten your wet palette. I soak the ever-living crap out of mine. You can see up here, there's plenty of moisture still in my palette, and I have not painted in about 24 hours. Now, the adverse effect to that is that your paint ends up pooling up quite unnaturally, right? A lot of people think that you're supposed to be able to take this wet palette and travel around with it for days on end and use this paint, and that's just simply not the case in my opinion. There is no reason you're supposed to be able to use miniature painting acrylic paints for days on end on these things. Some people can, they're okay with the consistencies, that's all well and good. But the problem is, wet palettes were derived for canvas painters, for watercolors, for pastels, for oils even. Basically, wet palettes were created for canvas painters. Our paint in the miniature painting world, Vallejo, Monument, Games Workshop, whoever you use, is developed to be used this day, like in this session. But if we get something like this, I'm going to give you a little tip here on how you can continue to use the paint the next day, but don't expect to be able to use this stuff over the next couple of days, okay? And I just want to give you a couple of examples here. Like, these are a couple of glazes that I've had on here, and everybody says, well, if you have a ton of moisture in your wet palette, it's going to over moisten your paints, right? Well, how come my glaze is not workable? If that's the case, these 3 piles of glaze should be workable, but I can't. As you can see, I barely got any pigmentation on that brush whatsoever. There's barely any on there, right? But then I come over here to say this deep blue, and this paint is workable, but it is insanely thin. See if I can focus in. Probably too close. There we go. It is super thin. See how thin that is? Okay. So how do we combat this? A lot of times if you have too much water in your paint, or in your palette, I should say, quote unquote too much water, according to the people that say don't over moisten your wet palette, you'll end up with this blob. Now this is, I decided I gotta shoot this video because I have the perfect example right here on my palette, right? So what I want to show you guys is it's really just this simple. You take a wadded up piece of paper towel, you take the corner, and you'll see there's like, sometimes you get like a skim piece of dried up paint, but that's pure pigment, or that's pure water right there, right? Sometimes you'll get like a crusty layer or a film over top. You can kind of peel that back with the top of your brush. In fact, this brown might be able to do it here. Let's see. No, that's a little too far gone. There's sometimes a skim, maybe this ivory. Sometimes a skim little, nope, that's all water. But anyway, let's get back to this blob right here. All you do, you don't cram it in there, but just barely touch over it and let your paper towel absorb all of that moisture, right? So I've pretty much got all that paint ready to go. There's a little bit right here on the side that I'm going to do the same thing to. Just going to kind of soak up all that extra moisture, and it wicks right into that paper towel, right? Check it a couple of times. Go around it if you have to. There might be a little bit over here. Just tap it on there, and it sucks up all that moisture. Okay? Now, if I make sure I got it all, I come in here, and the paint's going to be thin still. It's going to be inherently thin. But now we've taken out a considerable amount of that water. There's that skim that I was talking about. I should have probably dug down deeper. But now, if I work this paint a little bit, I can use this paint. It's not the prettiest, but it's still paintable. Let me get a piece of plastic card. I come over here, and that's paintable paint now, right? So for those of you who are worried about the 4 or 5 cents worth of paint that you've left on there over the course of a 24-hour period, by doing this, by dabbing your paper towel into those paints, you can save them. Here's some metallics. It doesn't work as good on metallics because they just inherently separate, but I'll show you. Just kind of, hopefully it'll pick up on camera. You can see it wicking in. But you just take your time, kind of get what you can out of there as far as moisture goes, and then your paint should be workable. That's the key word there, should be. You come in here, mix it up. Now this is from a one-on-one class where I mixed a bunch of ink into it, and so it's going to be a little thin due to the ink and transparency. I also mixed transparency, but essentially this paint is now workable after pulling off all of that excess water. Now I come over here to this plastic card, and it's still thin, but that's how it was when I mixed it because it's got a lot of ink. This is a silver with black in it. We were trying to create a metallic or a metallic shadow, but it's still very workable paint now, right? So go ahead and give this a try with your own paint. Your palette, don't be afraid to moisten your palette. A lot of people are just afraid to moisten their palette, and then they get frustrated with wet palettes because, well, my wet palette's not keeping my paint workable. Well, you're getting fear-mongered into worrying about excess moisture in your palette when really it's not a factor, in my opinion. It really shouldn't be any issue. You know, I could come over to this brown and try my best to reconstitute it. See all that moisture that just came out of there? But I can tell you right now, it's super chunky. Because I think this is 2 or 3 days old. But let's see if we can reconstitute it using some medium. Yeah, see, it's pretty chunky as it is. But for shits and giggles, why don't we try it? Let's add some medium to it and see what happens. This is just airbrush medium. I'm going to pop some over here. And then I'm going to grab some. And let's see what happens. Yeah, I think this paint's too far gone. It's pretty chunky. See that? It's like Pangea. Tectonic plates breaking up. Yeah, that's too far gone. But anyway, that's the quick tip for the week. Don't be so worried about moistening your paint. I should say your palette, sorry. Let me zoom out here and I'll show you guys exactly what I mean. Like, I literally, a lot of people will say, if you pull back your sponge and you do this and you can see water around your finger, you got too much moisture on your palette. I say, hogwash. I soak this thing because I'm going to be down here for a couple of hours and I'm going to be painting for a couple of hours. And if I throw some paint on here, I want this palette to be moistened, okay? So by the time I'm done, there's still going to be a little bit of paint in this palette. And yeah, I might get a little bit of this water sitting on top action. But you can come in and save it. You just kind of, boom. Dab the top of it. Get all that moisture out of there. And then your paint should be workable. See that? Mix it up a little bit and poof. This is black silver. This was no additives whatsoever to this paint. I'm just working it back in and I've got myself workable paint. Right? So there you go. There's your quick tip. Don't be afraid to moisten your wet palette. Alright gang. Appreciate you. Have a great November. I appreciate you sticking around, and we'll see you next time.